I am Jon Sauber. He is Tim Frazier. You are listening to Season 2, Episode 4 of The Nitty Gritty. Hello and welcome to The Nitty Gritty, brought to you by Beyond the Big Ten. I am Jon Sauber, Penn State men's basketball writer at the Center Daily Times. He is Penn State legend Tim Frazier. Tim, how are the holidays?
Man, been good, man. How about you, man? Happy New Year. Blessings to you and your family, man.
Yeah, same to you. This was, this is a weird time of year for me, right? Like I'm usually not home for Christmas because of Penn State Bowl games. Was home for Christmas this year, so got to see the family right before I left. Went down to Atlanta from the 26th to 31st, got home the 31st, and then took a long nap until pretty much today, New Year's Day. We're talking on January 1st, 2024, of course. It's been a long week. I'm still tired, but we're going to muscle through it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been tough for you. It's been tough for me either, too, because, it's bowl season. You know what I mean? You feel like, the guys that work so hard just to get to bowl season, and then I hate to say it, man, they laid that egg 2 days ago. I was all hype and ready, and I'm like, all right, we finish the year on a good note. Next year we come again, and next year will be our year. But man, I don't know. I'm having some doubts of what I saw Saturday.
Yeah, it was a weird spot. There were a lot of opt-outs as we saw, which is a whole other issue, but it was essentially like a completely different defense. They go from being one of the best defenses in the country to getting torched by Ole Miss. And, a lot of that is your two starting cornerbacks are gone, and their wide receivers are some of the best in the SEC. So, they're going to be good. And yeah, they took it to them. It was weird too, because Penn State started that game really well, and they started moving the ball, and then it seemed like it kind of collapsed pretty quickly from there.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to jump too far into the football piece, but I know you're closer than I am. So, obviously, throughout the whole year, what have we been talking about is Drew Aller, can he throw the ball? So you got the inside scoop. Go ahead and give me a little piece of that. Can he throw the ball? Is it Franklin not letting him throw the ball? Is it that we don't have the receivers? What is it? Because I can't keep going around just rooting for the Penn State football, and I want to see the long. I'm used to seeing long passes, the Allen Robinson catch. I want to see some of that. I haven't seen any of that from him.
Yeah, no, and for our listeners, you can read about some of that at centerdaily.com, because it's something I write about a lot, right? Because everybody wants to know. It's one of those things, and this is going to sound like a cop-out. I promise it's not. The wide receivers were so bad this year that essentially you kind of can't evaluate Aller yet. He was not as good as he was last year in those limited reps and everything, but he also did not have a lot to work with. And so it's tough it's one of those things. Football is really unique, I think, in that way, especially for a quarterback. It's like you're putting it all on him, but if it's not working around him, you kind of can't even judge him yet. But those guys also weren't the only Penn State team to be playing in the last week, right? This was a stretch that you and I talked about with Penn State men's basketball, where things kind of needed to get together. We haven't recorded since the Ohio State win. They have a really, really difficult to stomach loss against Georgia Tech, and then 2 games they had to get right against teams that, I don't know, they had lost to a Bucknell team that was worse earlier in the year. Get those wins over Lemoyne and Rider. But I want to start with that Georgia Tech game and kind of lay out what exactly happened there, because it was. So I'm really not a complaint about the refs guy, unless Big Ten refs I have complained a lot about. They've usually been not great, and I don't think they're biased in any sort of way. I just think they're not doing a great job, generally speaking, and that's been the case a lot in recent years. But this was, I don't even know the officiating crew that was on this game. This is one of the worst calls I've ever seen. The broadcast said after it happened, it's a shame. I think it was Mike Hall of BTN who said essentially it was a great game, and to have it come down to how it came down is brutal, because essentially, to lay it out for the listeners, what happened, Ace Baldwin was called for a foul when Penn State was up 1, when Georgia Tech was shooting, and the Georgia Tech player essentially just fell, right? Yeah. Didn't make contact with anyone. The worst part was, to me, the official was not looking at the play. He was looking up at the shot, so he couldn't even see if contact was happening. So to me, he then just assumed that a foul happened. And to me, that's the last thing you can do in that kind of situation.
So I'm not a ref, but obviously I played, for a long time, and I've had my run-ins with referees, and and I've understood, and I've listened to referees just say, they're human, they're gonna make mistakes, but I do believe that you got to be right most of the time, because that's your job. You know what I mean? That's your job, is to be right most of the time. I understand some mistakes may happen, but I'm like you said, what Mike said in the end of the game, like, such a great game is determined by a referee. I think that takes away. Those kids, both sides played hard. It was a back and forth game. Penn State had the lead, and I just think that you let that go. You make that player make the shot to win the game. And I've been a firm believer of that too, even in the NBA and overseas and wherever it may be. Especially when it comes down to the line, if the foul is not blatant, I think a lot of times, and I've seen referees do that. That, hey, we're going to let the players decide this game. I'm not going to be the person to decide a game because it might have been a foul. I'm not sure if there was a foul, but he fell down, because things happen. Things fall down, guys driving the lane. And when you do that, there's risk and reward. Hey, I might get a foul. I might not get called for it. And so I was really upset about it. I think I even tweeted about it that, hey, I just wish that you let the players decide the game. Because, at the end of the day, that takes away from what would be 4 wins in a row for Penn State.
Yeah, and you mentioned, like, the worst part, to the even worse part, I should say, is like, so it's this loose ball situation where the Georgia Tech player pushed off to get the rebound, where it's just like, you know what, I'm kind of cool with that. It's kind of frantic, right? Like, it's you know what I mean. It's a loose ball situation. You don't want to decide the outcome of the game. You can't then call that foul right after if you're not going to call the first foul, right? It's either you call the first one and that's the end of it, or you don't call either. And I'm with you on, like, the blatant part of it in end of game situations. Unless it impacts the shot, like, you know what I mean? It's pretty clear that, okay, the guy couldn't get the shot off because of the foul, then there's no need to call it, right? Like, I especially hate some of the, as a guy's coming down after the shot's out, like if a hand touches his elbow after the shot's gone and it hasn't impacted the release, stuff like that, like barely grazes it, like stuff like that. But yeah, I think refs, I'm fairly certain too, in these kind of situations are taught, if you don't see it, you can't call it, right? The explanation is easier. Let's say it's inverted, right? And it actually was a foul and he didn't call it. Well, then the explanation is simpler. I didn't see it, right? Like, that's an honest answer. But you can't call a foul there that you didn't see. And I think that's the part that's probably the toughest thing to digest for Penn State, especially, they're down 10 points in the second half, force overtime, in position to win. There was like 2 seconds left or something like that. They played really hard, looked like a different team than the one that
made big shots.
Yeah, like it was everything was kind of looking how it was supposed to look. And they got back into it, by the way, with some of the pressing, right? Like with some of the havoc defense that they've been trying to get to. So I just think it's a shame that they didn't lose it on their own merit, right? Like they didn't lose it because they weren't playing well enough. And usually with officiating calls, like it's not like, okay, well, this, like, X, Y, and Z could have happened after that and it would have changed it. This really would have pretty much ended the game, right? Like, it was tough.
Yeah, and even now, like, we're not in middle school. They're not kids. They're not. These are potentially be grown men. There are no moral victories when we talking about at the end of the year wins and losses. I mean, that win. Let's say Penn State continues to take over and do the things that they need to do and win some big tough games, especially coming up into this Big Ten season. And that win is going to help. Neutral site against Georgia Tech in Madison Square Garden is going to be if we're looking at the committee and everybody's looking to say, oh, where's the big time wins outside of the Big Ten? That's going to go a long ways. And I just hate that happened for those guys. And myself as a fan, as an alumni as well, like, you just think that we can always fall back to the whole thing about Penn State always gets a bad whistle. And
it really is
like, it's unfortunate, but I'm sure every team says the same thing when they lose. Hey, we always get the bad whistle. But I think that if you look at the numbers, like if you go back from when I was playing and before mine, we feel like Penn State, especially in the Big Ten, does not get the whistle. Like, we've talked about that for the last 2-3 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's crazy to see that. And I just hate it for those guys. I hate it for Coach. I hate it for the players as well, because that would have been a nice big win, especially to roll off the big win they just had at Ohio State. So now you talk about a win at Ohio State, beat Georgia Tech in a neutral site. We have these 2 games that we're supposed to take care of, which they did, and blow them out the water. And now we get ready for Big Ten play.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the like for you as like the fan and the alumni and everything, like even like so the objective observer that I am, right? Like just seeing it from the outside, you see these trends, right? It was funny.
Yeah.
I think it was early in the season where another reporter asked Mike Rhodes about, I think it was officiating or not getting calls despite driving the lane. It might have been preseason. I don't remember when it was. Essentially, the question was about like, hey, you know, how do you adjust when you don't get these calls, intimating, you know, this is going to happen in the Big Ten a lot. And I think Rhodes said something like, what, like, is that a thing here? And like the people in the room just kind of looked at each other. It's like, yeah, this was, and it happened with Micah Shrewsbury too, right? Like we saw when he was here, like I think it's a rude awakening for coaches sometimes when they realize like, historically it feels like, and I don't have the data to prove this, but you know, looking at it anecdotally and from what I've seen, it feels like Penn State usually gets a pretty difficult whistle. Part of that is Big Ten officials tend to skew toward the home team no matter what. Penn State doesn't have a great home environment. I wonder if that impacts it at all. You know, like maybe they're just not getting the same advantage other teams are. I don't know. But like I said, I'm not one. I usually don't like to do the officiating thing. At the end of the day, Penn State had chances to close that out sooner. And to regulation, they did not get a good shot off to try and win it with Ace Baldwin. Took a contested three that kind of didn't have a chance. But still, when you deserve to win the game and you play well enough to win the game and you should win the game, you want to get that win. And they didn't at the end of the day. But now it all turns, right? Like you mentioned those two easy wins. There's not a lot to say there. Those are games they should win. It is good to see it happen because, like I said, they've proven they're susceptible at times to things like that. But now you go into a really difficult stretch, right? Like you're back into Big Ten play. Starts with Michigan State on the road, which is never fun. I don't know that anyone enjoys playing in the Breslin Center.
It's not fun. I enjoy.
Listen, true. That's fair.
I think I was a little different. Obviously, no discredit to the Penn State fans because they did show out for certain games, and it was fun to be home. But I think one of the special things about playing in the Big Ten is because the games on the road are so intense. Like you're gonna walk into the Breslin Center, right? And it's Michigan State. The fans. I don't know if they still do the newspapers or they pop the bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was a big wake up call for me. Like I was so juiced and so excited to be able to go there. And obviously now you're playing against obviously one of the greatest coaches in college basketball with Izzo, and they're normally one of the best teams in the conference. So like, man, I know, and I hope these guys are juiced up like I am. It's like, man, we get to go on the road right now. We have nothing to lose. We're going to go out there and compete. We just won 2 games in a row. Really should be 4 games in a row. We just beat Ohio State as well. So we can match up and we can compete. I mean, we just got to play our game. So for me, I'm like, let's do it. You know what I mean? I want them to feel that same way, man. We go there and like, we talked about it, last year as well with the team before and other teams. Like, man, we're going on the road. Nobody thinks you're going to win. Nobody gives you any type of hope, any type of a slither. Maybe they might give this much. And the only people that believe you is your family, the guys in the locker room, and a couple people that are just like, hey, they got money on the games. You know what I mean? So that's it. Man. That's it, man. Why not go out there and, man, shock the world, man? Go out there and have fun, play free, press the hell out of them. And who knows, like, what's going to happen.
Well, and that's the thing, too. Like, this is an important stretch because we're going to find out what this defense really looks like in Big Ten play. We saw it against Ohio State, how it can be helpful against Maryland. Mm-hmm. They nearly pull off that win on the road. And this Michigan State team, like I think their record's a little bit deceiving, right? Like they're 8-5, lose to James Madison to start the year. Yeah, and that James Madison team turned out to that's a good team that's going to make the NCAA tournament. Lose to Duke, lose to Arizona, lose to Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. The Nebraska loss is tough, right? Like it's not what you want, but at the end of the day, it's a road game in the Big Ten. We talk about it all the time. Those are never easy. And so like Penn State is facing.
And then they go beat. Hold on before you go. Then they go beat Baylor. You know,
right after that, literally right after that. Yeah. And I think that was even a neutral site game. So like, it's not like they were playing that one at home. So they just beat an Indiana State team that is actually kind of good. Like this is, again, it might not seem like a great win, but Indiana State's 55 in Ken Palm, which is good. Like for perspective on that, Penn State's 104 right now. And so I think like this is maybe not deceptively difficult because I think people will look at Michigan State and say, okay, it's Michigan State. They're going to be playing well, but they'll look at the 8-5, and be like, okay, maybe Penn State has a better shot than usual because Penn State's 7-6. If you want to base it on the records, this is a tough matchup. Like this is, if you were to go through the schedule and kind of look at some of the games that Penn State can pick off on the road, I don't know that this is going to be one that you would pick. You know what I mean? That would be near the top of the list or anything. But like you said, like this is where you kind of find out about this team, like what they're made of. Are they going to get up for these big games? Are they going to go into this road environment? Are they going to feel that juice from the crowd? Like they're going to feel that hate, that venom that they're getting and let it fuel them? Or, they're going to let it make them collapse? I think we're going to, we'll find out a lot. Like I said, it's honestly like, I don't expect them to win either of these next two games, but I think that we will learn enough to know exactly how this team can finish, right? Like if they're competitive, they could lose by 20. And if it's a competitive 20 against Michigan State, that'll tell us a lot about how the rest of the Big Ten season is going to go, because that 20 can look a lot different, right? You know what I mean? Like a loss is a loss, all that stuff too. But losing by 20 because they pull away late is a lot better than losing by 20 when, they get up early and they just kind of coast the rest of the way, and so I think we're going to find out. Like, I think this is the kind of 2-game stretch that you learn a lot about this Penn State team and this Penn State program and how effective this defense can be in this conference.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I hope they, you're ready, you're juiced up, man. Like you said, you just come off from 2 wins and, hey, man, Michigan State's coming up. You get to go there to Breslin Center and go out there and shock the world. I go back to what they told me at the Big Ten Media Day when I was there, man. We're here to make some noise. And this is another opportunity to do that, to say like, hey, man, we fell down early in the season, but we're here now. We're climbing back up. So I'm looking forward to it. But I will say this too, how we talked about the Ohio State game. We got Michigan at home at 11 a.m. or 12. I think it's a noon game or 11.
No, that is the Palestra game. And that is, so that crowd is going to be an awesome crowd. It is, so consistently, I will, die on this hill. The Palestra is the best arena in college basketball. It's one of the coolest places I've ever watched a game. Like I remember, so last year Penn State played Purdue there, right? If you remember, that was early January too. And I just remember, so I sat down the first time I'd been to a game with the Palestra. They played Iowa. I was like up in the top press row. So last year I was down like on the floor, and you can feel that place, man. Like it is like no other venue that I've ever been in, and no other sport. Like Beaver Stadium for football is insane. The Big House at Michigan for football is insane. Same with Ohio Stadium for Ohio State. This is like nothing else I've been a part of at any other sporting event. It was, like I said, you can feel the people on top of you because it's all like directly on top of it. And it was, it's the coolest place in college basketball, period. End of story.
Right. So I say that to say, hey, we talk about the same thing about Ohio State. We talk about this is the early game. Michigan might look at the record of Penn State or whatever it may be, and they look past it, man. And you know what I mean? You got another opportunity. Hey, go out and do it. You've done it before. And like I said, it's going to be rocking in there. It's going to be hot. I remember playing in Palestra, how hot it was in there. I don't know if they had air conditioning or if they did some new renovations since I played, but I know one thing, that was sweating. I was crazy. The floor was wet. They had the sun shining in from the windows up top. So I'm excited, man. Like you said, man, these next 2 games are going to kind of tell you where this team is going. Have they grown from, obviously the 4-5 losses in a row, the tough losses from the tournament, and have they picked up stride? Have they got a little kick in the butt to be able to like, hey man, it's time to, it's Big Ten play. It's time for us to up our game, because that's what you do. Obviously, you start the season, you want to start on a high note, but you want to continue to get better every year. I mean, every day, every game, and right now, it's time for the Big Ten. You have to up your level, because these guys are scouting you. They know we're beating up on top of each other. The Big Ten has been known to just beat up on each other all season long. So man, the time is now. Like, you've got a taste of it earlier with Ohio State and the Maryland, but now it's time to really get into it. And from here on out, it's straight Big Ten.
Yeah, and honestly, if they split these next 2, a lot of stuff is back on the table. Like I said, I don't necessarily expect it, but this is big from that standpoint too, right? It's not just we've talked a lot about the learning part. It's also like going to dictate a lot for the season. From a is the NIT like is that guaranteed? Is that what I mean? Are they going to have a postseason to work with there? Is the NCAA tournament a potential option still if they get going? I still think that's a stretch at this point, but seasons can change quick. But like I said, that this will be their best crowd all year, right? Like this is the BJC just can't get to the place that the Plesser can get to. It's going to be packed. They're going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of Penn State fans there. And honestly, the one that'll probably rival it is on February 21st. They play at Rec Hall, and they play against a now top 10 Illinois, or a now ranked, I should say, Illinois team. And it's, you got two of these games against good opponents that you can kind of try and steal. And I think those are the two that you look at from a they're good sells from a recruiting standpoint too, right? Like kids in Philly go to this game on Sunday and like, hey, you can play here. Like it's not every game, but once a year you get to go to play a place that's like the cathedral of college basketball.
Right.
You mentioned, by the way, how hot it is in there. I remember the Iowa game. They had those giant, like, industrial-sized fans, you know what I mean? Like, on the court trying to dry it off because it was so humid there. And it was, like, 15 degrees outside. Like, it was freezing cold outside, and the whole gym is, like, dripping in sweat, including me, despite not playing a single second of basketball.
Right.
But, yeah, it's an incredible venue. I'm very much excited for that. This is, like you said, though, we're just going to learn a lot. This is it's a direct contrast to the last two games where you almost learn nothing, right? Like it's like, oh, they beat Lemoyne and Ryder. Yeah, of course, right? Like this is what they were supposed to do earlier.
They're supposed to do that though, John. But at the end of the day, like you've seen it, like you said, like
right.
They look past Bucknell, and you see that those are games, especially in between where you just did Big Ten, and then you go get these games. You had, you have Ohio State, Georgia Tech, and you have these two kind of fall off games right now during Christmas break. There's no classes, literally, I mean, those are, I hate to call them trap games, but those are trap games.
Oh, they are.
I'm proud of the guys for them coming out there and really taking advantage. And I think it can help too. I know especially for shooters, which is something that this team is really, trying to find, I mean, guys that are just knocked down, especially from behind the 3-point line. Those are the games that try to get those guys going and try to be able to see, hey man, what do we have? What can we get going? How deep can we go into the rotation when it comes to Big Ten play? So hopefully coach was able to figure that out and those guys were able to get in some type of rhythm, because now you want some type of rhythm when it goes up against the Michigan State teams. Like obviously, like we look at the points, we see Kanye going and he's leading the team in points right now. And I think Ace had 9 assists last game as well. So those are the things that you want to see. You want to have great games going into big fights that you're about to go into, this war that they're about to go into in Michigan State. Yeah,
no, I'm with you. It is it's an exciting time, right? Like you mentioned that they had done this before with losing to Bucknell. I think it is a good sign that, hey, this isn't a team that's going to lose those games consistently, right? Yes, it happened, but they learned from it. And I think that's going to be something you and I can monitor all year, right? Like, okay, when something bad happens, what does the response look like?
Yeah.
Because the response to Texas A&M wasn't good. Butler wasn't good. VCU wasn't good. You know what I mean? Because VCU leads straight into Bucknell. They lose to Bucknell, looks a little better against Maryland, respond a little bit. And then they beat Ohio State. Lose to Georgia Tech in a really difficult fashion, one that can kind of create some cracks in the foundation, right, of the program. They respond by taking care of business in their next two games. So I think those responses are important, and responses to easy wins are important too, right? Like you don't want to get too up on yourself, and right, like exactly, and you don't want to get thinking that it's going to be too easy. So I think these two games, I am definitely going to enjoy them. It'll be nice to watch some Big Ten basketball again, right? Like you have. The end of December is always that weird time of year where everyone's playing no one, or you're playing like the best teams in the country. There's no in between, right? Like there's no like mediocre matchups. It's the two of the best teams in the country are facing off, or Penn State is playing Ryder. And so those are the kind of things you see, but we're getting full throttle now into conference play now that we're in the new year. I am excited. It's going to be a good time. And we are going to have all of that covered. I'm very much looking forward to that. You and I will be here throughout the season, and this is, I don't want to call it a make or break here, but the foundational year of a program is really important with a new head coach, because I think, like I said, you learn a lot of the baseline stuff, and you've been through coaching changes. I think you can learn a lot quickly about, right, like what a team looks like at the front end.
Yeah, for sure. With the new coaching, I think a lot of too is the like you said, the ups and downs. How can coach, handle the turmoil or the 5-game losses or the blowouts and or even on the same, how do you handle when you're blowing teams out or you're on a 5-game winning streak? And that's how you got to keep everything together. And I think with Rhodes. I think he's done a good job because, like you said, we just ran through their schedule of how it's been up and down this whole time. Good wins, bad losses. So I think he's got them in the right place. Hopefully now that they understand the severity of what's going on now. There is no more non-conference games, all Big Ten, and you want to finish in the middle of that pack. Usually when you finish in the middle of the pack, you playing some type of postseason. So I think that's the goal for them right now, but obviously not to look too far ahead. They got one game coming up against Michigan State and go from there, and whatever happens there, then you roll over, watch film, learn what you need to learn, and then and move on to Michigan.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is we've said it a bunch, but this is an important 2 games here, and I think it's rare that you kind of face 2 programs this good to start conference play. But hey, that's usually the Big Ten, right? That's how these things go.
Well, before we go, John, let's since this is the last day that we'll be able to talk about college football, you got to give me the final 4.
Oh yeah.
The predictions. Who you got winning, so I know who to put my money on.
Yeah.
The insider.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've gone back and forth on the Bama-Michigan game. I think Bama ends up winning in a game that's higher scoring than most people think. Yeah. I think, man, I really believe in Washington, but I've fallen into this trap with the Pac-12 all year. I thought Oregon was the best team in the country, and then they lose twice to Washington. So it feels like I kind of have to believe that Washington is the best team in the country. Give me, in the national title game, Washington over Alabama. And now,
Washington over Alabama?
Yeah, in the national title game. So that means Alabama over Michigan, Washington over Texas. And that also means that you should absolutely be betting on Michigan and Texas today. Because I am telling you that it's Washington and Alabama.
So my only thing is that the championship game is in Houston.
Ooh.
Texas. It's in Houston, Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is with
this is the year, though. Sometimes even in college basketball is your year. Texas has been bad. They've been bad for so long. Boom. And they got the best draw. If it was Texas against Alabama or Texas against Michigan, I don't see them winning. But I see them beating Washington. I just think I see them beating Washington, and then I'm hoping that Michigan, they get over some type of hump. Then it's Texas, Michigan, or it could be Texas, Alabama again. Man, that'll be a rematch, and I think that game
of this year.
Yeah.
Well,
but regardless, I got Texas being in the championship just because I do believe a lot of stuff. I hate to say it, that it's all about, sometimes it's about luck, and sometimes a lot of it is about revenue. So you trying to tell me you have Texas in the championship game against Houston?
Well, here's the thing. The playoff title game, it's always weird because it's like a corporate event kind of more than and this is true with the Super Bowl too, than necessarily fans. So I'll be curious to see how much of that is actually Texas fans, because if they're playing Bama fans will be there. If it's Michigan fans will be there, right? Like, but no, and just to give him a shout out because he deserves it. He does this with a lot. We never mention him. Our producer Amir in the chat with us says Michael Penix is a dog, like 100%. Like that's like part of this, right? Like that is absolutely part of this.
I hate that we say he's a dog, but he didn't win the Heisman. So all right,
I had a Heisman vote.
You did?
How did you ever talk about this?
No.
Who did you pick? Right? Like I have.
Who did you pick?
So my ballot was Jaden Daniels first, Marvin Harrison Jr. second, Michael Penix third. I don't subscribe to the.
He's third.
Listen, he's third best player in the country. It's pretty good. Man. Hey, listen, it's better than anyone from Texas, Bama, or Michigan, though. And so the reasoning on that, just to clear this up, because some people came at me for having him third, I don't subscribe to just because a team went undefeated, their quarterback should win the Heisman. The award is supposed to go to the most outstanding player, regardless of none of the other stuff matters. Just like most outstanding player. Yes, LSU did not go undefeated. They lost multiple games this year. Jaden Daniels was the best player in the country, right? Yeah. Marvin Harrison, like Ohio State, lost to Michigan, yes. And he's a wide receiver, not the quarterback. He's the second most outstanding player in the country to me. So, and I actually almost voted him first, which I'm sure
I would have picked him first, honestly.
I thought about it, but the Daniels was so good running the ball too that I just couldn't. It was tough to deny. LSU with Daniels is like a total game changer, and I actually think they're about to play Wisconsin. I think we're going to find out just how valuable Daniels was because he's not playing in that game, and I think it's going to show. Which again, as soon as this gets posted, we're going to find out how dumb I am because it's going to be like an LSU 45-point win or something like that. But whatever, we try.
Got you. So I want to make sure. So I got Texas.
Yes,
I got Texas versus Alabama.
You take Michigan here? I was gonna say there's no way.
Texas.
Like
Texas.
You're
Alabama.
too much. Yeah. I'm taking Washington over Bama in the national title game. So
I don't know who's winning the championship. I just got Texas and Bama.
Yeah, all right, you're gonna take the easy way out. No, I see how it is. But no, I think that's a good place to end this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I always enjoy the playoff, and expands to 12 next year. That's going to be a lot of fun too. Maybe Penn State can actually make it for the first time in program history.
They got to make it with 12 teams.
Yeah, they do. They really do. But that's a good place to leave it. You can find Tim on Twitter at TimFrazier23. You can find me at Jon Sauber. You can find all my work at CenterDaily.com. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.